Welcome back, our BrainWise friends, to the next episode of My BrainWise Coach. And before we go into our introductions and talk a little bit about our week, you probably heard that the name has changed. We were formerly BrainWise, Our Lives Decoded. Now it's just My BrainWise Coach. And we wanted to just take a moment and tell you why we've made that change. Everything about our podcast and the premise of it stays the same. We're still here to provide a look at our brains through a neuroscience lens to help us make better decisions in our life in the areas that we want to improve. That is still the main premise and the intention of our podcast, what we're trying to accomplish. We just, as we've gone along the journey and we've been advertising it and we've been sharing it with people, My BrainWise Coach is the name of our LLC, and it just makes more sense. It's a little easier to connect it, and it just rolls off the tongue a little bit better, and people can search it. That's what our handles are on all of our social pages, as well as in all the different podcast streaming sites. My BrainWise Coach, it just made it a little easier. So everything is the same. The information we're going to provide to you is the same. Phil and I haven't changed. Maybe we've changed clothes. We hope we've changed clothes anyways. Phil put on a fresh pair of a shirt today and pants and all that. But
I did too.
Perfect. Okay, good.
Took a shower as well.
Oh, I did too. Yes, I did too. Very important. But the only thing that's changing is the name. So it's My BrainWise Coach, and we're excited about it because it just flows in a little bit better way off of the tongue. But before I dive in, of course, I'm Bastian, one of your hosts, and I'm joined by my fabulous and very talented co-host, Phil Dixon. And Phil, how are things progressing with the kitchen? The last title of our episode, in case you weren't aware, is the beginning part, Is Our Kitchen Done Yet? That's the title of it. So we're eagerly anticipating it. So how have you been, and where's the kitchen at?
So I have to say that I think the last time we were on, I said, my goal is to be able to boil an egg indoors.
Yes. And did you do that?
We actually didn't. We beat it. We did bacon and eggs.
Woo!
Exciting. And I have pictures if people want them.
Congratulations.
So bacon and eggs. And we've actually been cooking on it now since last Friday. And this is Thursday. So we've got a week of it under our belt. So we are 95% done. We are in the final stages. It's what they call the punch list. It's all the little bits and pieces that didn't get done en route. So in fact, they're down there today, starting on quotes, the punch list, unquotes. And in fact, I'll move straight on to that was my BrainWise. It was not a BrainWise moment. It was a BrainWise sense of almost positive overwhelm. It was done. And finally, we could relax and enjoy the chaos of the last 3 months. So thanks for living through it with me.
Absolutely. Anything I can do to support, and super excited to come visit and enjoy the kitchen that you have built with Kathy. I just know it has to be. It's just stunning. And for our BrainWise friends, if you follow us on social or you watch this on YouTube, we're going to have the episode thumbnail be the picture of Phil's kitchen. And we'll also do a post on it because I know that a lot of our listeners are eagerly anticipating the day that it is complete, and they're going to want to see how beautiful it is. So congrats on it being done, and very exciting as you're going to be able to now cook indoors versus maybe you went back a few generations and were cooking on the campfire. Oh, very good. This week has been really positive for me also. It's been one kind of a reflective week. Last week, I wasn't feeling too well. So this week I've been bustling ahead to try to get things accomplished. And we actually are going out of town this weekend for a family reunion, which will be very exciting to see all of Joey's family on his mother's side and just really enjoy the time with them. So I'm excited about that. And what I'm just as excited about is this week, we talked, Phil, early on in our podcast series that I was writing a book about all of the amazing things that my team and I were able to accomplish at my current organization. And when you go through the book writing process, I think everyone has a different experience with it. But mine has been, I've wrestled with, should it be one book, two books, too many models, not enough, all of these things. I finally made a decision, and it's going to be the narrative plus some application in one book, and then the field guide on how to replicate it in your own organization in the second book. And I'm happy to say that the first one, the draft, is complete, which is so exciting. I just get such a sense of relief in being able to say it. And I think my BrainWise moment is related to that because I finished it on Tuesday of this week. And I had recognized, I always tried to work out in the morning because I knew I needed to get my workout done. And it's something I wanted to accomplish, but quite honestly, I don't like working out. What I found was when I would do that, sometimes especially on the book side, I'd put it off and I would do other things related to our podcast, or just because there was so much complexity around what I was trying to redo in my way of thinking on the book. And so I decided, you know what? I'm not going to work out first. I'm going to get right into the book because I wanted to do it. I'm excited about doing it. It's the thing that I really wanted to do. I just didn't know exactly how to attack it. And so instead of avoiding it, I said, you know what? I'm going to do this first. I did. I got it all done, which was a huge sense of accomplishment. And guess what? My workout was even more intense because I was running off this like emotional high of having it complete. So I think my BrainWise moment is I made the conscious choice to do something that I enjoy, even though it was challenging, it was something I wanted to do and enjoyed doing more than working out, which then made my workout even better, which is something we've talked about on our podcast, that kind of rule of thumb, or that idea that do the thing you hate the most first, and then the thing you love next, is actually, from a neuroscience perspective, the opposite way. We should do what we love first and then go into what we may not enjoy as much. So that's my moment this week.
And absolutely, I just want to endorse that. It'd be interesting when we talked a couple of weeks back, I think it was about mental models, worldview, and that idea of doing what you dislike most and then getting it behind you and doing what you like. It's probably a mental model down either from a social belief or a religious belief or something like that. And yet, in fact, it flies in the face of the neuroscience.
Absolutely. And it's interesting because I'd never really thought about it until we started really diving into it and talking about it. And I was like, oh, that makes total sense. And then I experienced it firsthand. So I would encourage our BrainWise friends to do the same thing. Maybe flip the script a little bit and do some things you really love first, and then tackle the things you may not enjoy as much next, because you'll have a better sense of achievement. So it was a great week, Phil, with some really great intentional BrainWise moments. And the book is out to the interviewees that I interviewed for the book for feedback and approval on their quotes. So within 2 weeks' time, the deadline is October 10th. I'll be getting all those final approvals and then be submitting for publishing the week after, which I'm just so excited about. And I will also say, from an emotionally healing perspective, transitioning out of the organization, when I put the last sentence down, it was like I was able to finally emotionally move forward in my career in such a powerful way, in a very positive way. So it was good. All the way around, 10 out of 10.
That might be an interesting lesson for us to think back on, about what you went through, the neuroscience aspects of it, and whether or not it's something that other people can learn from. Because what I meant, as AI comes into our lives more and more over the next 3, 4, 5 years, there is going to be more and more people that are going to be in the position that you've just been in for different reasons. This is going to be a change of workforce. I read an article by, I think it's Strategy and Business magazine, about 2 weeks ago, that said they anticipate that 75% of people's jobs, people in 75% of jobs, their work is going to change drastically over the next 3 to 4, 5 years. So I think we've got a big change management, transformation management tsunami coming ahead of us.
Totally. From both the organizational perspective and then the individual perspective, individual person, because there's interventions at both levels that are very different in perspective. So I totally agree. And it's, how do we help people? So maybe that's something that we talk about, specifically around AI. I just wrote an article on LinkedIn, or published it anyways, related to the intersection of the VUCA model and AI. And you remember we did a Women in Leadership Forum not too long ago where you presented on the VUCA model, and then we talked about its intersection with AI. And I think there's just a interesting correlation there in how it's amplifying everyone's experience within that. And VUCA stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, or change sometimes is the other C that people put in there. And then we ended up talking about it can help to increase people's experience in that in a more possibly negative way, or it can also help them navigate their VUCA experience if harnessed correctly. So I wrote that, and I think it's just a fascinating topic. So maybe we do have an episode where we talk about change and AI specifically for people's jobs in the workforce.
And I'm thinking of a little module to help in people's transformation or transition process. whereby you actually have them write a sort of Forbes article on what they did leading up to their exit.
Totally. 100%. Because it's very cathartic to do that. It's almost like journaling, but journaling in a more like a business professional type of way.
Journaling with a purpose. Yes.
Exactly. Right. Yes.
So
I love it.
We just invented something today.
Oh, perfect. You heard it here first.
There we go.
Maybe we'll do our next episode, or either the next one or the week one after that, possibly, on what we just talked about, because it's very timely.
Yeah.
All right.
Let's plan on doing that. Great idea.
Let's do it. Today's episode is an exciting topic, and I think our BrainWise friends are going to have a lot of fun and a lot of learning out of this, and we're going to make it as fun as humanly possible, which I think the topic is naturally already there, which is the facts and myths about the brain. And pop culture and society loves to toss around bold claims, or that we attach ourselves to something that may or may not be rooted in fact. And so we're going to talk about that today. We're going to decode some of those facts and myths, so that way we arm all of ourselves with information to know exactly what is actually happening. And it's just fun to see, are the things that we have been taught all our lives or that we've heard through different experiences, are they fact or are they myth? So we should have played a little game. Maybe we'll do that with when we bring a guest on next time, Phil. We'll play a 5-minute game with them on the facts and myths of the brain, and we'll list them out and have them say, is it fact or myth? Hopefully they won't have we want them to listen to the episode. We want it to be a fun game anyways.
We'll figure it out.
Yeah, we'll do that with our next guest. I think that'll be fun.
All right.
Go
think
ahead.
The lady at the UN General Assembly yesterday said, without fact, you don't have truth. Without truth, you don't have trust. That's why we're going to delve back in, and we'll make this as factually based as we possibly can.
Absolutely. And we'll have a little fun along the way. So let's get into it. Let's start with our first one. So Phil, let's start with the first classic. Do we really only use 10% of our brain? Is that fact or myth?
So let me ask you a question first.
Yeah.
Is it legitimate for me to use the word on this?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, that's the best summary I can give.
So I assume in our context is also equivalent to myth in this case.
That's exactly right.
Right. Okay.
And the crazy thing is, I want to read you something here. And this is from a book called We Are Our Brains. And the guy wrote, take the myth that we only use 10% of our brains. You might well be forgiven for thinking this is the case with certain people, but we haven't the faintest idea what prompted this crazy theory. So if you do some research and you try to come back, first of all, it doesn't make any scientific sense whatsoever. The brain, as we've talked about, is a huge energy hog, right? It's occupying 20% of the energy, the oxygen and glucose of the body. And why would you have, from an evolutionary point of view, that amount of energy devoted to something that you're actually only going to use to 10%? It doesn't make any common sense. That's number one. Number two is, if you look at all the work that's been done on the brain, or all the research that's been done on the brain, most of the research, at least until we had an MRI machine, was done on damaged brains. So part of the brain got damaged, and we then looked at what was the impairment to the functionality of the brain to determine what it was doing. It didn't matter what part of the brain got damaged. We couldn't find something that was doing nothing.
Right.
There isn't, to the neuroscience thinking, there's no part of the brain that's like empty real estate hanging around for someone to do something with, build a property on it or whatever. It just doesn't make any sense. Now, whether we're utilizing the capacity we have in the best way possible, that's a different issue. But I think there was a movie that came out called Lucy, which sort of emphasized the point and made it even accentuated the myth. So 100% myth.
I have a couple of comments. One is, there's some movies that are out there that Hollywood always has a great way of pulling on these threads, that if we used more than 10% of our brain, we'd have superpowers, right? Which obviously we've just demystified that whole 10% of our brain experience. I'm also curious if maybe some of it was derivative from the conscious versus non-conscious brain. We talk about there's a lot of what's happening in our non-conscious, and then there's only so much of the things that we're consciously making choices about. I wonder if someone along the journey made some derivative assumption based off that, but it was actually factually incorrect in how they stated it.
I don't know. We've done all the research. William James, he's credited with being one of the early psychotherapists in America. He stated that most of us don't use our full potential. Right? Again, that's different from, are we using all of our? Bottom line is, if someone says that to you, we only use 10% of our brain, find your own way of saying, really, that's bullcrap.
100%. Because your brain is being used, all of it is being used all the time. But then potential is obviously a much different discussion. Let's move on to our next fact or myth about the brain. And I'm not going to ask it in fact or myth. I'm just going to ask you a question, and then you can state what the myth is and tell us if it's a fact. So, what does neuroscience show us about the brain's activity during sleep?
Yeah, you think of it, you're asleep, and therefore you think the brain must be doing nothing.
It's resting.
It's resting. And, well, it's probably the opposite. In some ways, when people have been asleep and where they've been under an MRI machine, we actually see as much, if not more, activity in the brain when people are asleep. Now, what is actually going in the relationship to dreams? There's a lot of theories. There's a lot of, but there's very few provable theories on dream and its use. So we're going to go to what can we actually see? What can we actually measure in the way of activity in the brain? And we think it's probably got at least two things going on, possibly more. The first one, I think we did cover this a while back, which is when you're asleep, it seems like the gaps between the neurons actually expand, and that allows like a flushing process to occur. So obviously that takes activity for that to occur. And if any of you have been to Paris, any of our BrainWise listeners have been to Paris, in Paris, overnight, they will actually flush all the curbs with water. And it's a sort of a similar process. We clean out our brains. If you don't get adequate sleep, then that doesn't occur. And it seems to have, if you don't flush the brains out like that, it seems to be a derivative, or rather, it's a causal event for plaque to build up, which probably has some aspect of dementia. First, number one, I think we talked about it, get more sleep. The second thing we think happens is a sort of memory, is a sort of weeding out what you want to remember and consolidation of memory. And so, again, this is what we believe happens, is during the day, the brain is looking for threat and reward. Overnight, it looks and says, okay, what was threat, what was reward, and what was neutral in the middle? And from an evolutionary point of view, we can throw away all the neutral stuff. It didn't have an impact from an evolutionary perspective. It turns out if we are under some level of chronic stress, we will tend not to focus on the reward memories. We would tend to focus on the threat memories. And again, from an evolutionary point of view, that makes sense. So bottom line is, if you'd ever said, is it false or is it true? I'd say, no, it's false. The brain is not totally at rest when we're at sleep.
Right. We need the sleep to be able to do the processes that the brain is doing while we are sleeping. Even though it may not be sleeping itself, it's actively doing something so that way we can have a better day the next day. So it's absolutely essential function.
You've got a lot of things actually going on in the brain, all mishmashed together, and it's by no means is it at rest.
I think it's a good kind of way of looking at things from a perspective of business or even in home, which is, and I'll just talk specifically around our professional careers, that honoring the recovery time that it takes for people to recover from an experience or to move through change or whatever is actually going to most likely lead to better performance. Versus if we don't honor the time that people need to recover from whatever may have just happened, we're going to get less performance. People a lot of times think that speed to recovery, or let's just dive right back in, is the best way. And maybe for some people, their recovery time is a little faster, but for others that it takes a little bit of time, you're not going to get the same level of performance from those people if you don't give them the space to work through whatever has just happened in their kind of mental models or in their experience. So, Phil, let's tackle another fact or fiction or fact or myth statement, which is the left brain, right brain idea. And we talked a little bit about this on a previous podcast or previous episode, but is it fact or fiction around the right brain and left brain, or one's related to creativity, the other one's related to whatever, like that kind of situation?
If you're a person that doesn't like to live in ambiguity, you're going to hate my answer, because the answer is both yes and no.
Oh,
And yes, from a physiological point of view, there's a left brain and a right brain, and they are connected by the corpus callosum, which I accidentally wrote down one point, the corporate callosum, but that's
same thing.
a neuroscience in joke. However, we used to then turn around and say, yes, that's the way the brain works. The left brain is the administrative, organized part of the brain, and the right brain is the creative and extremely out there, out of the box thinking type of brain. It turns out it's nowhere near as simple as that. Even in speech, there's parts of the speech which are driven by the left brain, as parts of the vocabulary are in the right brain. And so what we've learned is it's actually a much more integrated set of networks, and that's a much better way of thinking about it rather than left brain, right brain. And if you're trying to work out where people's preferences lie, there's probably some degree of preferential. We might have a preference for logical thinking versus emotional thinking and the other way around. But if you can avoid using the mental model of right and left brain, but use the model of a networked brain, integrated network brain, that's a much better model.
Exactly. We're not just one thing or another, right? We might have a higher propensity for being more logical or being more empathetic or having that kind of creative side, but we are capable of doing all. We may not be as good at it as someone else is, just like someone will never be as good at something as we are, but we're not incapable of doing it. We can begin to stretch ourselves into being something a little bit different.
Absolutely. That's actually one of the problems with what became the strengths-based movement. Is it became a sense that we only had a set of strengths and then we couldn't develop the other things. We can develop pretty much. The brain is amazingly plastic. We can do what we want. If you put your mind to it, you can actually learn many things.
Which is a great segue into our next fact or myth. Are we really stuck with the brains we're born with, meaning it's fixed, never changing?
Not at all.
So that's a myth, right?
Wait a minute. Let me read. False. Yes. Use some more politically correct language. How's that?
Perfect.
We're not stuck with what we are. There's so many examples of where people, again, I didn't, but people used to study the brain by what damage had happened to it. And we found that even to the point where if some part of the brain is damaged and is not available, other parts of the brain will reconstruct to take over those functions. And so the brain's amazingly plastic. There is a lot of research that says if you can take yourself back to when you learned how to do things and then relearn them, the brain will recover most of the functions that you can. It may take a while, not to happen overnight. I knew of a woman who was taken into Stanford, and she died on the operating table 3 times. And she had major damage done to her brain. When she came back out, she came to work for us, and she had extreme difficulty in doing the things that she could remember that she knew how to do. She knew that she knew them, remember how to do them. And over a 2-year period, it all came back to her.
Wow, that's amazing.
We're not stuck with what we've got. It used to be, we thought your brain grew until it was about 16 or 17 years old, and then you were stuck. That was the rest of your life. Again, what was the word I used earlier on? Bullcrap.
Yeah.
Your brain is able to change, or pretty much now. It changes slower as we get older. Mm-hmm. In fact, I saw a line the other day that said, you can't teach an old dog new tricks is not accurate. Mm-hmm. The more accurate saying is it takes longer to teach an old dog new tricks.
Totally. And I see that with teaching my grandfather how to use a touchscreen cell phone many years ago. He's 92 now, so he was probably in his 80s when he got one. And teaching him to use it was both challenging and took time, but he now can use it. It just didn't come quite as naturally or as fast for him.
And part of what we also do is we use old words for new things, right? So if you were to have, if we could have listened in to you teaching your grandfather, and I bet you would have turned around and said, and now here's how to dial. We don't dial on a touchscreen anymore.
No, we call.
We call, but we use old words and we adapt them for new things. And maybe it would have been better for us to have invented a new word. And yet when was the last time you hung up a phone?
I ended the call.
You ended
I haven't actually physically hung up anymore. That's been a long time ago.
Right. And so, but all those words hang around.
Right.
And what do they trigger, especially in the minds of older people?
Exactly, especially because there was a period of time where we did have the landlines and we hung it up, and I remember that. But even then, there was a quick transition from the cord where you had to hang it up to where you could click end on the wireless phone that you're walking around with.
Right.
But it didn't even then change. And even today, I'm going to hang up the call. Really, you're going to end the call. It's hilarious because on the phone, it'll actually say, I'm going to end the call versus hang up, but we still use the word hang up. Just fascinating.
Yeah, and so that might be another episode. What are that impact our brains that we should actually be not using anymore?
So I have another kind of question for you, and I imagine this one's going to be a bit, for those who don't deal well with ambiguity, it's going to be another one of those moments for us, but what about the idea that men's brains and women's brains are fundamentally different? Because we hear that nomenclature a lot from Hollywood, that men and women's brains are just totally different.
Wow. And this could get me into big trouble. Let's see. So bottom line is 99%, probably 99.99% of the brain of men and women are the same. Physiologically, there are a few small differences. And the concept that they're different has come from a couple of areas. One is socially, over the last 200, 300, 400 years, we've pushed this idea that men are good at fill in the blank and women are good at fill in the blank. It turns out that most of that is socially driven. And there's a lot of books come out in the last 10 to 15 years that actually just highlight the fact that it was a socially driven difference that we were inventing. So that's number one. Number two is somebody, I forget who it was, did some recent research that basically put men and women without any social implications facing the similar things, whether it be logical or emotional. It turns out they came out very close. Without the social implications behind it, we're pretty well close. I have self-confession time. And that is when I first started to learn about the brain, which would be in the late 70s, early 80s, there was a paper written which identified the fact that the bundle of nerves connecting the left and right brains, called we mentioned it just now, the corpus callosum, was 15 to 20% bigger in women than it was in men. And we used that physiological fact to prove why it was easier for women to be better at multitasking or have more access to their, quotes, right brain than the left brain, all sorts of things. Well, it turns out that 20 years later, 15, 20 years later, someone went back and looked at that original research and found out that the research was bullcrap. There was one small, basically, set of fibers at the back end, which was slightly bigger in women than men. But the sample size in total was about a dozen people, and half a dozen of them were women. And so the actual validity of that, quotes, fact was wrong. And so it was such a small sample size. And yet it got magnified by the press, by the media, and like me that got hold of the paper and started saying this seems to be the way it is. And so one of the reasons why you'll hear me say many times this is what we know about the brain right now. Ask me in a week's time, it may be different. What we know about, we're just scratching the surface of what we know about the brain today.
And I think it's important to note too, we're not saying that we're talking about the physical structure and the physiological structure is almost identical, but there are differences in how women and men show up each day, right? And that could be influenced by a variety of different things. And there are different hormone levels, right, for men and women, which can also impact different things that happen within the brain itself. We were talking about the chemical cocktail not long ago, and that is to some degree different, especially when we talk about estrogen versus testosterone. So I think that is important to say. It's that the myth of that we have fundamentally different brains is actually not true. The differences just show up in how each different person shows up in their day-to-day life.
And I'm going to read something. It was a study done a few years back. So this is about 10 years ago now in Psychological Bulletin, looked at 500,000 boys and girls from 69 different countries, because there's a myth out there that boys are better at math than girls are better at math. Boys are better at science than girls are better at science. And what was found, contrary to popular belief, is that there was almost no gap in mathematics ability between boys and girls. That's a pretty big study, 500,000. Let me read it. And when they went back and they re-looked at some of the other studies, they said some of the sloppiest, shoddiest, most biased, least reproducible, worst designed, and most over-interpreted research in the history of science purports to provide biological explanations for differences between men and women. Now, that's not holding things back in a scientific paper. Neuroscientists once claimed that head size, spinal ganglia, or brainstem structures were responsible for women's inability to think creatively, vote logically, or practice medicine. Basically, I want to repeat that first. Some of the sloppiest, shoddiest, most biased, least reproducible, worst designed, and over-interpreted research in the history of science. So I think that's you double click on the word bullcrap, and those were the explanations.
It's important to know that because from a physical perspective, the brains are all basically identical. It's just how each individual shows up in their life and what they were exposed to is when that's for all of us. It shapes behavior, it shapes decision-making, it shapes how we choose to show up. And we're by no means saying that the physical part of our bodies are different. Obviously, there is a difference there in our genetic makeup, but the brain itself, when we talk about it from that perspective, that myth is not true.
Yep. I'm going to read something else here. It says, women are thought to outperform men on tests of empathy. They do, unless subjects are told that men are particularly good at the test, in which case men perform as well or better than women. So it's how you set we talked about framing. And so scientific research is just as much about, do you frame the research in the correct way possible?
Right.
So as I said in my book, the myth of major gender differences in the brain is not supported by the research.
We're by no way trying to persuade, I think is another thing. We're just providing education. And so now if you want to do some more research on your own, Google Scholar is a great place to go. And Phil's book is a phenomenal place to go to get validated research. But you heard it here first. The two are not, in fact, that different. Phil, let's go to the next question, which is, can the brain itself actually feel pain?
The brain itself, as far as we know, does not feel pain. That's probably a good job because brain researchers will actually drill through your head. That part of it, don't shake too much. I know it makes me shiver. But as they're going through the skin and the nerves at the endings there and this, that, and the other, that part of it feels pain. But once you get inside, it doesn't. And in fact, I want to mention something, which is this paper came out this week. There's a horrible disease called Huntington's syndrome. Probably heard of it. And it's a debilitating disease which tends to show itself up when you're about in your late 20s, early 30s, somewhere like that. And typically, you've got a lifetime expectancy of about another 15 to 20 years. A piece of research done, I think, in the University of Surrey in England, found it's a long and complicated process, but they can go in, do gene therapy on the brain and increase the chances of success by 75% of increasing by multiplying the expectancy by a significant amount of money. A significant amount of time. And very expensive, which is why I said money. But it's one of the few breakthroughs of science that is purely amazing. And that it happened over the last year and a half, but it got published this week.
Wow, that's amazing. And it just provides hope for those who may be afflicted or have family members or friends who are going through that when it becomes more affordable and comes to the broader market. The myth of the brain feels pain is now demystified. And so let's go to our next one, Phil, which is it true that women are better multitaskers than men? And quite honestly, can we multitask at all, do two things at the exact same time?
Again, if you're not into ambiguity, you're not going to have the answer, because I'm going to answer it depends. It depends on what we mean by multitasking and over what period of time. So if you can do two things at the same time, the answer is actually no. If you try and do two things at the same time, work on this part and this part, what actually is happening in the brain is the brain closes down the part that sort of, if you imagine a stage with all the surroundings and the people and this, that, and the other, then to do one part, you've got a certain stage. And it's like being in a theater. You'd have to change. I've just lost my screen here. There we go. You'd have to change the whole set and the characters. So that's expensive energetically from a brain point of view. But if you're trying to do something at the same time, you're actually reducing your efficiency. Now, having said that, it depends on what you're trying to do. We all do multiple things at the same time. If you're driving along and you're thinking about the route that you're taking, then you're actually doing multiple things at the same time. Yeah. If you're driving along and you're having to think about where you're going, and someone's on the phone with you and asks you to vision something else, again, you're asking the brain to do two things with the same set of circuitry at the same time. So again, it depends on what you're actually trying to do and what actually your mind is. You know, if you think that there's an excuse saying, oh, my brain's perfectly good at doing multitasking, it isn't. You're just making it work a lot harder.
I think it carries this badge of honor that people are, I'm a great multitasker. And it's actually been probably to some degree given a positive reputation and is a trait that's desired by a lot of companies is your ability to multitask. When in reality, yes, we want you to be able to be highly efficient, I think is the better way of phrasing things and accomplishing the goals that we have in front of us and the tasks in front of us. But the idea and the premise that we're going to hire the best multitaskers for different jobs, just that is demystified in this case and probably sets people up for a less performance in terms of their ability to do all of those things successfully. Whereas we just need to look at efficiencies. How efficient is someone? How creative are you in being a problem solver to get things done, even when presented with multiple challenges?
Yeah, and I think we hide behind multitasking. We don't probably be asking how adaptable you are,
right?
How flexible you are. Even to the point where I read an article just this morning that said one of the most powerful words in the world is no. Because sometimes we should be saying no when we say yes and are forced into changing the task that we're working on. Very inefficient to do that.
Totally, 100%. Phil, the next fact or myth, are humans good at observing and noticing what's happening around us? Or is that a fact or a myth?
So you mentioned playing games. Let's play a game with our BrainWise listeners at the moment.
Okay.
And let's give them two or three, a little bit of time. What do they think? Are we good at observation or are we not?
Put it in the comments of the episode if you think we are or not.
Yeah. And so we'll just give them a couple of minutes. And I'm going to cite a couple of really well-known videos, research. You can find this on YouTube. And it's a group of people, and I'm sure you've seen this video, a group of people either wearing black shirts or white shirts playing basketball. And so the task is count the number of times that the people wearing black shirts pass the basketball between them. And so that's the task, and that's the focus. And when I do this with a group of people, I actually set up another challenge, which goes back to what we were talking about And I say, we've got a real live experiment we can do here because we think women are better at doing this than men. So we up the ante, right? Concentrating. And while the game is going on, it only lasts about not even a minute, I think. En route, a big person dressed up as a big fat gorilla walks into the screen, turns around, thumps his or her chest, and then moves out of the screen. And 50% of the people don't see the gorilla.
Wow. It's just amazing.
When you actually then play it back to them, some people are in disbelief that there was actually such an event that they completely missed. So that was the first experiment that was done. And that experiment got to be fairly well known. And so I can't remember the guy's name who did the experiment, but they repeated it. So in case you'd seen it before, they did it a second time. This time they had the gorilla walk in. The color of the curtains behind changed, and one of the players left. And again, the majority of people didn't even notice any of because they knew that the gorilla was going to be there. They were now focused on the gorilla. They didn't see the other things.
So you heard it here first. We're not that good at observing and noticing what's happening around us, especially when we're very focused on one specific task.
Absolutely. The same guy did an experiment where they actually, I won't go into all the details, but they had somebody inquire where they were. They showed them the map, and they actually changed the individual that was doing the question. The person never noticed.
Wow.
We are influenced by what else is going on around us. We are influenced by the words that we use. And I think we may have mentioned this one, the difference between a video where a car hit another car and what speed was he doing when he hit the other car versus what speed doing was when he crashed into the other car or smashed into the other car. Those change our ability.
Fascinating.
So the answer is, it depends. We're not very good at it.
Right.
So when you translate that into, let's go into the courtroom where we're talking about people's ability to be witnesses to an event, then it's not very reliable. We assume that they're 100% reliable.
And I'm sure that varies case by case too, to some degree. If we're just identifying the person that was there and we have other ways to prove what happened, then they probably can do that if they saw them. But absolutely, I think we're not all being able to recount all of the details accurately is certainly not a very reliable source.
And what we know about the brain is when the brain goes into memory, an event goes into our memory, we tend to take the gist of the event rather than the details of the event. And then when we replay it in our mind or say it to somebody else, we have to invent some of the details.
Right.
And that's where we get into trouble. So the answer is, yeah, we can obviously recall, but whether we're very accurate at doing so, no.
Which is actually the next one, which our next factor myth, but we know what about memory? Our brain's good at remembering accurately, and you just answered it. The reality is not, we can recall, but it's not always going to be vivid details and factual evidence of all of it, of a recount of it, which I think it goes back to, there's always been this kind of additive that I've always shared with people, which is there's my truth, your truth, and the actual truth, especially when going through conflict resolution with people. And my truth is looking at it through my worldviews and mental models and what I can actually accurately recall. Same thing for you, but then there's the fact or the truth. And we talked about this a while back too, that then that's where we start arguing on the inference level, right? Versus the actual facts of the conversation or the facts of the situation that happened. And so being able to take a step back and remember that we definitely feel very impassioned that what happened for me is what is truly what happened. But it may just be that's how it was inferred. But the fact is, here's what happened. And so it's my husband and I actually spend time talking about this, maybe not in that form or that detail, but we'll say, okay, let's take a step back and maybe our experience of the situation was different. What's the root of what we're trying to solve or come to a consensus on?
Yeah. So, yeah, we're not very good at it.
Right, for sure. Which I've got another factor myth for you, Phil. Do we really only have 5 senses?
So what do you think they are?
I know we have sight, smell, taste, hearing, touch. Those are the 5 that are predominantly advertised. But I
Right.
imagine that because it's on our list today, it's probably a myth, and therefore there are more.
You're correct. So let me give you a couple of tests.
Yeah.
Between I'll read the visual, auditory, tactile, gustatory, and olfactory. Said,
Yeah.
when you feel hungry, what is that sense?
Probably none. Maybe I'm starting to crave something, so my taste is. I'm not tasting anything. I don't know. I have no idea.
No,
That's something internal.
It's something internal. So we know there's another sense there. When you do this, and you know that your arm is in a certain position, your brain knows that it's
right.
By the way, if you're driving and you're BrainWise listener at the moment, don't do this. Don't lift your arm.
Don't raise your hand.
So we've got lots of other senses going on. So let me read out what they are.
Yeah.
Because they're big words and I can never remember them. What I just did in moving my hand is called proprioception. No reason, please don't try and remember this or even pronounce it. It's difficult.
Can we phrase that as body positioning?
That's exactly what it's called. Body is we know where the positions of our body are at any given point in time. If I was to take you and turn you sideways, right, and you were now laying down, you'd know you were laying down, not standing up.
Right.
In the ear, we have sensors that actually help us know that. Right. So we not only know our body positioning, but we know where we are in relationship to space like that.
So balance to some degree?
That's a good way of putting it. The third one is when you're hot.
Oh, I definitely do. I do not like to be hot. I don't like to sweat. In fact, I have my little fan here in case it happens. I'm 100%.
Yeah. And I'm going to embarrass you now.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Oh, always. Yes. You've known me so long, and it's probably not difficult to do.
Before we went on air, you said, I'm going to go and do something. Can I tell everybody what you did?
Sure.
Yeah.
I don't remember what it was, but sure, go ahead.
You knew you had to go and pee.
Oh, yes.
Where's that sense coming from?
I'm not going to say exactly where it's coming from. That might get us kicked off the air.
It's actually it's coming from here, coming from your brain.
Yes, exactly. That's a good way to put it.
And so we just call it internal senses. The knowing you're hungry, all those type of things. So there's a whole bunch of internal senses like that. And the last one is time passage. When time goes by, that that must have been a few years ago, or that must have been a week ago. We've got a sense of that as well. So there's at least 4 senses. And let me read out, in case everybody gets to be very proud of the fact that we've got 5 very obvious senses and I've just added 4 more. Can I read a paragraph from my book?
Absolutely.
We think we're pretty clever with our 9 senses. But compared with other species, humans are missing out. Bats and dolphins use sonar to find prey. Some birds and insects see ultraviolet light. Snakes detect the heat of warm-blooded prey. Cats, seals, and other whiskered creatures use their whiskers to judge spatial relations or detect movements. Sharks sense electrical fields in the water. Birds, turtles, and even bacteria orient to the Earth's magnetic field lines. And take a standard plant, lean it over, and have it continue growing. What happens?
It grows sideways and then goes back up.
Then it goes back up. It do that.
It's following the light would be my very uneducated scientific guess. That it's following the light. Like when you watch sunflowers, they face the light, and throughout the day, the sunflower moves as it follows the light.
And there's also a part of plants that are detecting the light and open up slowly. And then when the light passes, they don't close in the same rate. They stay open for a lot longer and then gradually close. So the cycle that takes them up indifferent to the cycle that takes them back down. It's called chaos theory.
Fascinating. Truly is fascinating.
So we've got lots and lots of senses out there that we just don't fully understand yet.
And the ones that are most advertised are the 5, but you heard it here first. There's actually some 4 additional ones in addition to the ones that we all know. So now that people are aware, it'd be interesting to see, are they recognizing when those senses are there? Body position. Like it's almost lunchtime, so my stomach was growling. So that is a sense, but I never thought of it that way before.
Yeah. And taste, I think we may have had this conversation before, but taste is impacted by all of those other things. So it's not a pure sense in and of itself, because taste can be impacted by smell, visual. They basically say taste is drastically improved if it looks pretty.
Totally.
So, some wonderful research going on about, for example, when you bite into a bag of chips.
Not the bag, but the chip itself, right?
Well, thank you for the correction. And by the way, that's one of my addictions. Don't put a big bag of chips in front of me because I'll eat them all. What they've started to do is the crunch that you feel and you hear, does that impact your taste?
Oh, I'm sure it does.
Turns out it does. They've actually put headphones on people to negatively take away the crunch, and doesn't want to taste anywhere near as good.
Very interesting. Yeah, there's probably some expectation behind it too.
Absolutely.
Very interesting. Let's move to our next fact or myth. Are we really good at predicting what makes us happy or not?
Some people there's a little bit more of a spread of opinion here. If you look at the work that a guy called Butler did on the blue zones of happiness, he identified, I think it was 7 aspects. And if you have all these 7, you're probably statistically a chance of being more happy. Some of that research is being called into question now. Our ability to think what we want in the future, we believe is pretty good. We can, hey, what do you want to be in 5 years' time? Is quite a common question in interviews, for example. Yet our actual ability to think what it might be like for us in 5 years is not very good. So what we're doing is almost like a linear projection of where we are today,
right,
rather than a reinvention of what it might be in 5 years' time. We're able to identify things that might bring us joy from time to time, but whether we're very good at identifying what we want to make us happy in the future, probably not. I would love to encourage our BrainWise listeners to tell us what they think. Were they able 5 years ago to predict what brought them happiness today?
And I think one of the other things too is that we oftentimes overestimate the joy of things and underestimate the value of relationships, which can be why promotions, purchases, or big wins often feel fleeting, but a deep conversation can linger for years. So where are we putting more value in our happiness? It probably comes from, I would assume, because we've talked about the need for participation, interacting with those that we really care about. And finally, Phil, is change really that hard? Fact or myth? Or I don't know if it's fact or myth, or maybe a mixture of both.
Wow, it's a mixture of both. Once again, true and false. For the brain to change, it actually doesn't take much. Anybody who's listened to this, their brain will have changed slightly as a result of listening to it. And if they enjoyed it, it would have changed even more. If they hated it, it would still have changed. They won't ever listen to us again.
Hopefully they enjoyed it. Let's, positive intention, right?
And so the brain changes very easily.
Mm-hmm.
Psychologically, we don't like change.
Right.
Because it involves loss and all sorts of other things as well. And the brain can change. So the answer to that will be, it's true. Is it easy to change? Sometimes yes, sometimes no.
Yeah.
And we talked about some of those in past episodes.
For sure. Totally makes sense. It's the myth that change is universally hard. It's because our brains are built to change, but it's letting go of comfort, letting go of what's known, habits and beliefs, that's what we usually resist from a change perspective.
And I'd say this is if change wasn't a useful evolutionary thing to do, we wouldn't have curiosity.
Right.
And so curiosity, again, double-edged sword. Those people that were curious, curiosity killed the cat, as it says, which is another worldview, by the way.
Yeah, it is.
If you didn't go out and explore, then you didn't find new sources of food. So we are built to change, but psychologically we often resist it. And that's one of the great reasons is if you can start to separate whether you can change versus whether you want to change, they're two separate, completely, and whether you're ready to change or not.
Totally. Oh, that's a huge part. We talk about organizational readiness. There's also individual readiness.
Yeah.
Assessing your ability to change or your readiness level to change. Phil, as we summarize or come to the close of our facts and myths of the brain discussion, is there any last tidbits or ways you want to summarize it for our BrainWise friends?
I'd say two things. One is there's a lot of myths out there that are purported to be facts. Second, if you've got anything that comes to mind that you wonder about whether it's true or not, you mentioned it earlier on, 20 minutes or so, go research Google Scholar. It gives you all of the answers, but without all the commercial stuff wrapped around it. And I would say that's the best. So that's the summary. There's a lot of myth out there. If you're in doubt, look at Google Scholar.
And you can always email us too at questions@mybrainwisecoach.com. And if we are aware and we know, we'll certainly answer it. If not, we might direct you to some research or something like that. But if there's something you're interested in learning more, we would love to engage with our BrainWise friends. So,
and I'm always looking for new research to do.
Yes. I love it. I enjoy reading the research that you find interesting because I love to learn. I'm a lifelong learner, and I think it's just absolutely fascinating.
There is a newsletter out there for anybody that's interested in exploring the neuroscience. It's called Neuroscience News. Just search for that, and you can sign up, and you can get a daily report of all the things. Typically, about 5 or 6 papers a day come through on that. And the good news is they've done the interpretation for you. And its format is there's a headline, a summary, an interpretation, and then there's the actual reference to the paper itself if you want to dig even further.
Very cool. And here are a couple of our reflection questions for all of our BrainWise friends as we wrap up our conversation on facts and myths of the brain. And I think one of the things that I learned today was that some are both fact and myth. It could be a little bit of both mixed in together is what it seems like to be a common thread in some. So which of these myths have you believed, and how does your knowing the truth shift your perspective? Where might you be underestimating your own brain's capacity to adapt, grow, or change? How have cultural stereotypes about brains like gender differences or multitasking shaped your own self-story? That one's really good.
I love that one.
And what's one small shift you can make to move from myth-driven behavior to fact-based living? So pick one or two that resonate with you based off what you have heard and learned in our podcast today. We are so excited that you continue to come along our journey with us. We've got new and exciting guests that are coming on our podcast in the next couple of weeks. So that's what we have for today's episode. Thanks for joining and tuning in today. If you enjoyed the conversation or you learned something, as always, like, comment, subscribe to wherever it is you get your podcasts or all of them. Follow us on our social pages at My BrainWise Coach. We're all over the place. So go find us because we're always posting other cool things on there that we may not be talking about on the podcast all the time. And of course, the number one thing you can do if you want to support us is share this podcast with your friends, your colleagues, people at work, in your circle, so that they too can begin to learn how to be brainwise. And until then, stay curious, stay compassionate, and always stay brainwise. We'll talk to you next week.